I used to think the most terrifying sound in the world was the flat beep of a heart monitor in my mother's hospital room 7 years ago. I was wrong. The absolute cruelest sound was my sister's soft chuckle over the phone, cutting through a crowded airport lounge on a Friday afternoon. One single sentence completely tore apart the thick veil of lies woven by the exact people who share my blood. Hello, dear listeners of Vivian Revenge Stories. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us without the budget to keep operating. If you find today's story engaging, please consider supporting our team with just $1 so our staff can cover their living expenses and continue creating these stories for you. You can donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on the screen or by clicking the link in the description and comments. My name is Maria Lane. I am 34 years old, and my entire professional life is built on numbers, probabilities, and identifying catastrophic threats long before they happen. As a senior data risk analyst at Aegis Core Solutions, a massive private corporate firm up in Seattle, I am paid an exceptionally high salary to see the invisible patterns of disaster that other people miss. I spend 40 to 50 hours a week analyzing secure networks, flagging anomalies, and predicting human deception for billion-dollar clients. Yet despite all my training and expertise, I entirely missed the massive, festering blind spot waiting for me inside my own childhood home. It was a violently chaotic Friday afternoon at Charleston International Airport in South Carolina. The terminal was a suffocating sea of weary travelers dragging heavy luggage, screaming toddlers running past the food courts, and the relentless, echoing announcements of delayed flights echoing from the overhead speakers. I was physically and mentally exhausted. I had just spent the last 5 days surviving another draining holiday visit with my family, playing the familiar, exhausting role of the dutiful, highly independent daughter who lived 3,000 miles away on the rainy West Coast. That morning had been an absolute blur of rushed goodbyes and frantic last-minute packing. My father, Arthur, had been hovering around the kitchen island with a mug of black coffee, making his usual superficial small talk while I jammed the last of my sweaters into my oversized carry-on bag. In the dizzying rush to confirm my rideshare application and get out the front door, I had blindly swept my hand across the granite countertop and grabbed my phone. At least, I thought it was my phone. My father and I both had the exact same generic matte black protective case. It was an honest, seemingly insignificant mistake. A tiny human error that was about to detonate my entire reality. I finally made it through the agonizingly slow security line, practically running barefoot on the cold tile floors, and collapsed into an uncomfortable faux leather chair near my departure gate. I let out a long, heavy sigh, grateful that the mandatory family bonding was finally over for another 12 months. I reached into my heavy wool coat pocket to check my work emails, expecting to see urgent notifications from my risk assessment team back in Seattle. Instead, the device in my hand violently vibrated. I glanced down at the illuminated screen. The caller ID did not display a random string of digits. It displayed a familiar name, accompanied by a contact photo of a woman smiling radiantly under the bright summer sun. Chloe, my older sister, the undisputed princess of our family, the golden child who could never do any wrong, and the one person who always seemed to need rescuing from her own terrible life choices. I swiped the green button to accept the call, bringing the cold glass of the phone up to my ear. I opened my mouth to speak, to tell her that I was safely at the airport and that I had accidentally taken our dad's phone off the counter, but I never got the chance to utter a single syllable. "Dad, is she gone?" Chloe's voice came through the tiny speaker. It was rushed, breathless, and completely devoid of her usual performative, sugary sweetness. Before I could even process the sudden urgency of her question, a sharp, incredibly relieved laugh escaped her lips. "Good. We will move the money tonight before she finds out." My lungs instantly seized. The bustling, overwhelming noise of the crowded airport terminal completely vanished, replaced by a deafening, hollow ringing in my ears. I sat completely frozen in the middle of a crowd of hundreds of strangers, unable to draw a single breath of air. My fingers gripped the edges of the black phone case so tightly that my knuckles turned completely white. Before she finds out. The words echoed in my mind, sharp, lethal, and devastatingly clear. She was not talking to me. She thought she was talking to our father. And the she they were so desperate to get rid of, the she they were hiding something massive from, was me. My professional instinct took over before my conscious mind could fully comprehend the depth of the betrayal. I did not scream. I did not demand immediate answers. My thumb moved mechanically, pressing the red button to end the call right then and there. The screen went completely dark, reflecting my own pale, horrified face back at me in the glass. I stared down at the quiet device resting in my trembling palms. It felt exactly like I was holding a live, unpinned grenade. A massive financial secret. A highly coordinated deception between my own father and my sister. They were eagerly waiting for my plane to take off, waiting for me to be 30,000 feet in the air and utterly disconnected from the world, so they could execute whatever twisted plan they had orchestrated behind my back. The entire foundation of everything I believed about my family had just shattered into a million pieces, and the jagged edges were already drawing blood. A normal daughter would have immediately marched to the nearest airport customer service desk to hand the device over to the lost and found. A normal daughter would have assumed there was some innocent, harmless misunderstanding about the phone call. But I am not paid to be a normal daughter. I am paid to dissect anomalies, trace hidden liabilities, and expose corporate fraud. The second that call abruptly ended, the desperate sister and the grieving daughter inside me died completely. The cold, calculating risk analyst firmly took the wheel. I stared down at the glowing lock screen. A simple passcode stood between me and the truth. Arthur was a creature of absolute habit and profound laziness when it came to technology. He was not the type of man to utilize complex biometric security or randomly generated numerical sequences. I typed in my own birthday first, August 12th. Incorrect passcode. A bitter, involuntary smirk crossed my lips. Of course not. I cleared the illuminated letters from the screen and typed the digits I knew, deep down in my gut, would grant me full access. April 29th. Chloe's birthday. The phone instantly unlocked with a soft, confirming click. It was a tiny, seemingly insignificant detail, but it felt exactly like a sharp, ice-cold blade twisting directly into my ribs. Even his digital security was a permanent monument to his favorite child. I bypassed his basic text messages and went straight for his primary email application. People who hide massive secrets always leave digital footprints in their administrative correspondence. I typed the word confidential into the search bar. Nothing but banking spam. I tried the word urgent. Just a few mundane utility bills. Then, I typed the name of the one specific person you only ever contact when your financial world is burning to the ground. A bankruptcy attorney. Specifically, I typed the name Thomas Vance, the lawyer my father had allegedly consulted many years ago when my mother passed away. Dozens of emails instantly flooded the bright screen. They were not old, archived threads from the past. They were active, highly detailed conversations dating back continuously over the last 7 years. I opened the most recent attachment, a portable document format file plainly labeled as a commercial lease renewal agreement. As my eyes rapidly scanned the dense legal jargon, the sterile airport lighting overhead seemed to dim, and the oxygen was sucked right out of my lungs. The document outlined a highly lucrative commercial lease for a prime piece of real estate located right in the booming industrial district of downtown Charleston. It was the exact plot of land my late mother had inherited from her parents. The very same land Arthur swore to me he had been forced to sell at a massive loss 7 years ago to cover the astronomical hospital bills during her final agonizing months of cancer treatments. I vividly remembered him looking me right in the eyes, weeping uncontrollably in our living room, telling me the inheritance was completely gone and that we had to start over from nothing. It was a lie. A grotesque, unforgivable, calculated lie. The land had never been sold to anyone. It was still entirely under our family's legal name, and it was currently being leased to a massive corporate logistics company. I scrolled down past the indemnity clauses to the payment terms. The monthly rental income was $40,000. Every single month, for the past 84 months, a massive fortune had been quietly deposited into a private trust account I knew absolutely nothing about. My hands stopped trembling. The initial shock was rapidly crystallizing into a pure, absolute, and terrifying rage. I needed to know exactly where the money was going. I opened the mobile banking application on his phone. He had not even bothered to log out of his current session. I navigated directly to the transaction history, and the sickening reality of my family's financial ecosystem laid itself bare before my eyes. The money was nothing but a direct, unhindered pipeline to Chloe. Every time the corporate logistics company paid the rent, Arthur immediately wired nearly 90% of it into various limited liability corporate accounts registered entirely under my sister's name. I sat there in the uncomfortable terminal chair, reading the itemized receipts of my sister's endless catastrophic failures. There were massive cash injections to keep her disastrous luxury candle boutique afloat before it inevitably went bankrupt. There were tens of thousands of dollars used to quietly settle her delinquent high-tier credit cards. There were legal settlements, luxury sport utility vehicle leases, and desperate bailouts for shallow business ventures that were doomed before they even launched. For 7 long years, the legacy my mother intended to leave to secure the future for both of us had been completely drained to fund Chloe's lavish, utterly irresponsible lifestyle. Arthur had actively stolen my rightful inheritance to subsidize the delusions of a grown woman who flatly refused to work a real job. But the absolute worst part was not the missing money. The final, crushing blow came when I backed out of the email application and opened a hidden, locked folder in his text messages. I scrolled through a panicked, late-night exchange between Arthur and Chloe from just 2 days ago. Chloe was complaining about the lingering guilt of cutting me out of a brand new financial maneuver they were currently planning. Arthur's response was right there, permanently etched into the digital screen, dripping with a casual cruelty that finally broke my heart into pieces. Do not worry about Maria. She works at a massive corporation. She makes a high salary. She does not need this money like you do. I read the sentence 3 times. My chest hollowed out completely. They were not just stealing from me. They had somehow weaponized my own ambition, my own late-night studying, and my own grueling career success against me. My hard-won independence was the very excuse they used to completely strip me of my legal rights. Because I had built a stable, successful life for myself entirely on my own, they genuinely believed they had the absolute moral right to take what was legally half mine and hand it over to the child who simply refused to grow up. A harsh robotic voice echoed from the terminal speakers above my head, announcing the final boarding call for my direct flight to Seattle. I did not move toward the gate agents. I slowly locked the phone, slipping it deep into the inside pocket of my heavy wool coat. I was no longer the dutiful, understanding daughter heading home to her quiet life. I was a seasoned risk analyst who had just uncovered a massive, long-running fraud scheme, and the perpetrators had absolutely no idea that their victim was now holding all of their most sensitive data. The persistent, icy rain of Seattle beat heavily against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office at Aegis Core Solutions, but I barely registered the gloomy weather outside. It was early Monday morning, well before the rest of my department had even swiped their security badges to enter the building. The sprawling, open-plan floor was entirely empty, illuminated only by the sterile glow of the server racks and the harsh blue light radiating from my 3 massive desktop monitors. I sat at my workstation, staring at the exact digital copies of the data I had quietly extracted from Arthur's mobile device over the weekend. The initial shock of the betrayal had completely burned away during my 6-hour flight back to the West Coast, leaving behind nothing but a cold, hyper-focused obsession with uncovering the absolute bottom of this financial abyss. My mother's final will and testament had been incredibly explicit. The commercial property was supposed to be divided equally between my sister and me upon her passing. Legally, Arthur should not have been able to lease, mortgage, or alter the status of that land without my direct, legally binding consent. I needed to understand exactly how he had bypassed the law to establish that lucrative lease in the first place. I logged into a highly secure encrypted data terminal that I normally use to run background diagnostics on offshore corporate mergers. With a few swift keystrokes, I bypassed the standard public search portals and directly accessed the archived property records of the South Carolina County Clerk's Office. I pulled up the parcel identification number attached to my family's land. A long list of scanned legal documents populated my left monitor. I scrolled past the original deed of trust and clicked on a supplemental filing from exactly 5 years ago. The document materialized on the screen, and my blood instantly ran cold. It was a comprehensive, legally binding general power of attorney. The paperwork officially granted Arthur complete, unrestricted control over my legal and financial decisions regarding the inherited estate. I scrolled to the bottom of the second page, my eyes locking onto the signature line. There, written in dark blue ink, was my name. I leaned closer to the monitor, my breath hitching in my throat. It looked remarkably similar to my handwriting, but the sharp, hurried loop on the capital letter M and the heavy, uneven pressure on the final vowel gave it away entirely. It was Chloe's handwriting. She had practiced my signature, probably spending hours tracing it, and then forged it on a binding government document. Right next to the forged signature was the official stamp of a local notary public, a man who had undoubtedly been bribed or manipulated by my father to look the other way, while my identity was legally hijacked. A profound, sickening wave of nausea washed over me. This was no longer just a tragic story of a father favoring one daughter over the other. This was premeditated, documented identity theft. But a massive, glaring question remained. If they were comfortably collecting tens of thousands of dollars every single month from the corporate lease, why was Chloe panicking on the phone at the airport? Why did she desperately say they needed to move the money right now? Selling a property that generated that much passive income was financial suicide unless they were facing an immediate, catastrophic threat that required a massive lump sum of liquid cash. I minimized the county records and shifted my attention back to the cloned data from Arthur's phone. I ran a deep dive algorithmic sweep through Chloe's deleted communication cache. My sister had always been careless, completely unaware that hitting the delete button on a smartphone does not actually erase the data from the device's hidden registry. The software slowly rebuilt fragmented text message chains and encrypted messaging application logs from the past 3 months. As the restored messages flooded my middle monitor, the horrifying reality of Chloe's current situation slammed into me like a freight train. She had not just maxed out her luxury credit cards this time. She had bypassed traditional banking institutions entirely and borrowed an astronomical amount of cash from an unregulated, underground lending syndicate to fund a fraudulent cryptocurrency venture that had collapsed overnight. The messages were not polite notices from a bank. They were brutal, terrifying ultimatums sent from untraceable burner phones. They contained explicit threats of physical violence, photographs of the front door of Chloe's luxury apartment building, and terrifyingly precise details about her daily routine. The final message, received just 48 hours before my flight out of Charleston, demanded immediate repayment of the entire principal plus extortionate interest rates by the end of the current month. My sister owed these dangerous criminals nearly $2 million, and they were ready to collect their debt in blood. The pieces of the puzzle violently slammed together. the hasty phone call, the forged documents, the desperate need to act before I found out. I rapidly searched Arthur's sent email folder for any attachments containing the word contract or agreement sent within the last 7 days. I hit the enter key, and a massive legal dossier appeared. It was a drafted, fully prepared purchase and sale agreement. Arthur and Chloe were actively finalizing a private, off-market deal to sell the entire commercial plot to a massive, aggressive real estate development conglomerate based out of New York. The agreed-upon purchase price was staggering, enough to pay off the underground syndicate, cover their tracks, and leave them with a comfortable safety net. The scheduled closing date for the transaction was exactly Thursday of next week. I sat back in my ergonomic mesh chair, staring at the glowing screens as the sheer magnitude of the danger enveloped me. If that sale went through, the money would instantly be wired to an offshore account to pay off the violent loan sharks. But the paper trail, the forged power of attorney with my name illegally signed at the bottom, would remain permanently logged in the Federal Property Registry. When the authorities inevitably investigated the underground syndicate and traced the massive wire transfers back to my family's land, the federal government would look at the deeds. They would see my signature authorizing the sale. I would not be viewed as a victim. I would be officially classified as a knowing co-conspirator in a massive interstate financial fraud and money laundering operation. My career at Aegis Core Solutions would be instantly terminated. My professional license would be revoked. I would be facing decades in a federal penitentiary because my own father and sister had thrown me directly into the line of fire to save themselves. I reached out and placed my hand flat against the cold surface of the wooden desk. The lingering sadness of a broken family completely evaporated from my chest, replaced by the lethal, calculating calm of a woman who had just realized she was fighting for her own life. They had completely underestimated the monster they had created. They thought they could use my independence against me, but they forgot one crucial detail. I analyze and dismantle complex corporate threats for a living, and my family had just become my #1 target. My personal cell phone buzzed against the glass surface of my desk exactly 3 days after my return to the West Coast. The caller ID flashed my father's name. I let it ring 4 times, taking a slow, deep breath to completely clear any trace of hostility from my throat, before answering with the bright, slightly distracted tone of a busy corporate employee. "Hi, Dad. I am right in the middle of a risk assessment review. Is everything okay?" "Maria, sweetheart," Arthur replied. His voice was a masterclass in paternal warmth, oozing with a thick, sugary affection that made my stomach churn. "Everything is perfectly fine. I know you just flew back, and I know how demanding your firm is, but I was looking at the calendar. My 65th birthday is coming up this Saturday. Chloe and I were hoping we could coax you into flying back for a small, cozy family dinner. Just the 3 of us." I stared blankly at the rain sliding down my office window. A cozy family dinner. The absolute audacity was almost impressive. They were cornered by a violent underground syndicate, staring down the barrel of a multi-million-dollar debt. Yet he could still modulate his voice to sound like a gentle patriarch longing for his daughters. "Oh, Dad, I do not know," I said, injecting just the right amount of hesitant guilt into my voice. "The end of the quarter is brutally busy. Flights are expensive right now." "I will pay for the flight," he insisted immediately, a sharp edge of desperation briefly piercing his warm facade. "Please, Maria, it would mean the world to me. And actually, since you would be here, it would save us a massive headache. My accountant found an old tax confirmation paper from your mother's estate that needs your physical signature to clear out the archives. It is just bureaucratic nonsense, but it would be wonderful to get it out of the way while celebrating." An old tax confirmation paper. That was his brilliant disguise for a permanent quitclaim deed. They needed my legitimate, legally verified signature on a waiver of inheritance to ensure the title company would authorize the sale to the New York conglomerate. The forged power of attorney was evidently not strong enough to bypass the aggressive due diligence of a massive corporate buyer. They needed the real Maria Lane to sign away her life, and they were going to serve that execution order right alongside a slice of birthday cake. "Well, if it helps you out with the accountants, I suppose I can make it work," I replied, forcing a soft laugh. "I will book a red-eye flight for Friday night." "You are the best daughter a man could ask for," he said, his relief so palpable I could almost feel it radiating through the receiver. I ended the call and set the phone face down. I was indeed the best daughter a man could ask for, just not in the way he thought. A lesser person would have immediately dialed the Federal Bureau of Investigation or the local police department. But involving law enforcement meant years of tedious litigation, frozen assets, and the unpredictable chaos of the criminal justice system. I did not want justice. I wanted total surgical annihilation. I wanted to dismantle their entire operation from the inside out, using the exact corporate mechanisms I mastered every single day. I opened a secure browser and investigated the New York real estate conglomerate attempting to purchase our land. A corporation of that magnitude does not casually hand over millions of dollars without absolute certainty. They despise legal liabilities. They abhor fraudulent titles. I bypassed their general contact portals and found the direct professional email address for their senior vice president of acquisitions, as well as their lead corporate counsel. I drafted a meticulously structured, highly formal message. I introduced myself not as a disgruntled family member, but as the legal, 50% stakeholder of the commercial property located in Charleston. I clearly stated that the current seller, Arthur Lane, did not possess the legal authority to execute the transaction. Attached to the email was the undeniable proof. I provided certified copies of the original will, detailed forensic comparisons between my actual signature and the forged document, and a comprehensive timeline of the fraudulent activity. I explicitly warned their legal team that proceeding with the purchase would instantly entangle their corporation in an active federal fraud and money laundering investigation. I hovered my mouse over the send button. Once I clicked it, the nuclear bomb would be dropped. The real estate conglomerate would instantly pull out of the deal. The cash pipeline would vanish. Chloe would be left entirely at the mercy of her violent creditors. I did not hesitate for a single second. I pressed send. With the trap officially sprung, I turned my attention to the physical preparations for my upcoming trip. I walked over to the heavy-duty laser printer in the corner of my department and began printing the documents. Every single encrypted email between my father and the bankruptcy attorney. Every bank statement showing the massive transfers of my inheritance into Chloe's failed business accounts. Every terrifying text message from the underground syndicate demanding their $2 million. I gathered the thick stack of papers, perfectly aligning the edges, and slipped them into a sleek, premium black leather presentation binder. I tied a beautiful dark crimson ribbon around it. Arthur wanted a cozy family gathering for his 65th birthday. He wanted me to sit across from him, eat an expensive meal, and blindly sign away my future to save his favorite child. I placed the heavy dossier carefully into my leather travel bag. I was going to give him exactly what he asked for. I was going to attend his dinner, and I was going to present him with a birthday gift that would completely destroy his world. The naive daughter he thought he summoned was dead. The hunter was coming home. The reservation was set for 8 o'clock at the most exclusive dining establishment in the historic district of downtown Charleston. It was the kind of restaurant where the ambient lighting was perfectly dim to cast a warm, forgiving golden glow over the patrons, where the chandeliers were crafted from imported crystal, and the waiters moved silently in immaculate white jackets. The air was thick with the scent of roasted garlic, expensive perfume, and the quiet arrogance of generational wealth. When I followed the hostess to our secluded corner booth, my father and sister were already seated, sipping sparkling water with lemon. Chloe looked absolutely radiant. She was wearing an emerald green silk dress that easily cost $3,000, her hair perfectly styled in effortless waves, and her makeup flawless. She laughed brightly at a joke Arthur made, playing the role of the carefree, prosperous socialite to absolute perfection. Looking at her glowing complexion and perfectly manicured nails, nobody in that dining room would ever guess that violent, unforgiving men were currently hunting her down for a debt of $2 million. Arthur stood up immediately, offering a wide, beaming smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He wrapped his arms around me in a tight embrace. "Maria, my beautiful girl, thank you so much for flying all this way. It means everything to me to have my two girls together for my 65th birthday." "Happy birthday, Dad," I replied, my voice smooth and perfectly even. I took my seat across from them, folding the heavy linen napkin over my lap. The dinner proceeded like a grotesque, beautifully choreographed theatrical performance. We ordered aged ribeye steaks, buttered lobster tails, and a bottle of red wine that cost $400. Chloe dominated the conversation entirely, chatting incessantly about high society gossip, the upcoming summer charity galas she planned to attend, and trivial, exaggerated complaints about the humid southern weather. She acted as if we were the most functional, loving family on the eastern seaboard. But I am trained to observe anomalies. Beneath the glittering facade, the cracks were glaringly obvious. Every time Chloe took a sip of her expensive wine, I noticed her hand trembling ever so slightly against the crystal stem. Her eyes constantly darted toward the heavy mahogany entrance doors every time they swung open, her pupils dilating with raw, unfiltered terror before she forced herself to look away. Arthur was overcompensating, laughing too loudly, chewing his food too fast, and frequently checking the gold watch on his left wrist. They were terrified, drowning in panic, and using every ounce of their energy to keep the illusion afloat just long enough to execute their final trap. I played my part flawlessly. I smiled at Chloe's empty stories. I nodded at Arthur's golf anecdotes. I ate my expensive steak. I let them believe I was the exhausted, compliant corporate drone they needed me to be. Finally, the waiter cleared our heavy ceramic plates and set down 3 cups of black espresso and a complimentary birthday dessert. The grand finale had arrived. The air in the leather booth suddenly grew suffocatingly heavy. Arthur let out a long, exaggerated sigh. He rubbed his temples with his thumb and forefinger as if he were carrying the administrative weight of the world on his shoulders. He reached into the inner breast pocket of his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a neatly folded document. "I really hate to ruin a beautiful birthday dinner with boring paperwork," Arthur said, offering a tired, painfully apologetic smile. "But since you are here in person, it saves us the hassle of mailing this across the country. My accountant has been hounding me all week. He found an old tax confirmation paper from your mother's estate. It is just some outdated bureaucratic red tape from years ago. But they need your physical signature to close out the archival file, so I do not get heavily penalized by the government this year." He slid the document across the pristine white tablecloth. He reached into his shirt pocket and placed a heavy gold pen right next to it. The restaurant around us seemed to mute entirely. The ambient jazz music, the low hum of wealthy patrons chatting, the clinking of silver forks against china plates, it all faded into a vacuum of absolute, ringing silence. Chloe completely stopped breathing. I could see her chest freeze. She stared at the gold pen with a hunger so desperate, so entirely feral, that it bordered on madness. Her knuckles turned completely white as she gripped the edge of the table. I picked up the pen. The metal felt cold and heavy against my fingers. Arthur leaned forward slightly, his eyes tracking my hand like a hawk. "Just right there at the bottom, sweetheart. Right next to the yellow sticky note." Instead of moving the pen to the paper, I slowly brought my hands back to my lap. I picked up the document. I did not skim it. I read it deliberately, line by line, letting the agonizing silence stretch out for 10 seconds, then 20 seconds, then 30. The psychological pressure at the table became visibly unbearable. A bead of sweat formed on Arthur's forehead and rolled down his temple. Chloe's perfect painted smile began to aggressively twitch. Maria, Chloe pushed the words through gritted teeth, her voice tight, high-pitched, and completely unnatural. Just sign it. Dad wants to enjoy his birthday. I slowly lowered the paper. I placed the gold pen neatly down on the table, exactly parallel to the edge of the document. I looked directly into my father's eyes. I did not blink. I did not raise my voice. I spoke with the calm, measured tone of a predator that had finally backed its prey into an inescapable corner. Did this plot of land sell for a good price, Dad? I asked softly, letting a razor-sharp, freezing smile touch the corners of my mouth. Better than the price Mom paid with her life? The color completely drained from Arthur's face in less than a second. His skin turned the sickening shade of old parchment. The elegant paternal facade shattered into a million irreparable pieces right in front of my eyes. Chloe gasped sharply, recoiling deep into the leather booth as if I had just reached across the table and struck her across the face. "I have absolutely no idea what you are talking about," Arthur stammered, his voice suddenly weak, high, and defensively aggressive. He reached out quickly to snatch the paper back, but I slammed my palm down flat on top of it, pinning it permanently to the table. "You are talking absolute nonsense, Maria," Chloe hissed, her eyes wide with blind panic, her voice trembling violently. "You drank too much wine. Stop ruining Dad's birthday. Stop acting crazy. And give us the paper right now." I reached into my heavy leather travel bag resting by my feet. I pulled out the thick black presentation binder tied with a dark crimson ribbon and dropped it dead center on the white tablecloth. The heavy thud rattled the crystal water glasses and immediately silenced the table. "I am not acting crazy, Chloe," I said, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "I know absolutely everything. I know about the forged power of attorney from 5 years ago. I know about the $40,000 a month you have been siphoning into your failed businesses. And most importantly, I know about the $2 million you currently owe to violent, unregulated loan sharks." Chloe's jaw dropped. The remaining color completely vanished from her face. She looked like she was going to be physically sick right there on the expensive mahogany table. Arthur tried to salvage his crumbling empire. He reached out, his hands visibly shaking. "Maria, please, you do not understand. We were going to make it right. The sale of the property to the New York conglomerate next Thursday would have fixed everything. We were going to give you your share." "There is no sale, Dad," I stated flatly. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "What do you mean?" Arthur choked out. "I mean, I contacted the senior vice president of acquisitions and their lead corporate counsel 3 days ago," I explained, leaning back against the leather booth. "I provided them with certified forensic evidence of your forgery and a comprehensive timeline of your financial fraud. They officially and completely pulled out of the deal this morning. The land is not being sold." A guttural, horrifying sob ripped through Chloe's throat. She buried her face in her hands, her perfectly manicured nails digging violently into her scalp. "They are going to kill me," she shrieked, her voice echoing slightly over the jazz music. "The syndicate is coming for the money tomorrow. They know where I live. You just signed my death warrant." "You signed your own death warrant the moment you stole my identity," I replied without a single ounce of pity. "And I did not just stop the sale. By filing an official affidavit as a victim of financial fraud, my attorneys successfully secured an emergency injunction. Every single trust account, every single cent attached to that commercial lease is completely frozen as of 3 o'clock this afternoon. I am legally transferring full operational control of the property back into my name." Arthur completely broke down. Tears streamed down his wrinkled cheeks. He reached across the table, desperately trying to grab my hand, but I pulled it away. "Maria, please," he begged, his voice cracking with absolute desperation. "She is your sister. She was drowning. I just wanted to save her. You are so incredibly strong. You built a massive career. You have a huge salary. You can take care of yourself. You did not need that land. I stared at the pathetic, broken man sitting across from me. The father I used to idolize was completely gone. Just because I can take care of myself does not mean you have the right to steal what belongs to me to feed her failures, I said, my voice echoing with a cold, absolute finality. I stood up from the booth. I picked up the thick binder of evidence and tucked it under my arm. I looked down at the forged quitclaim deed, still resting on the table, and pushed it toward Arthur. Then, I reached into my purse, pulled out the itemized dinner receipt the waiter had dropped off earlier, and placed it right on top of his fraudulent document. Happy 65th birthday, Dad. The bill is yours. I turned my back on them and walked out of the opulent dining room. I did not look back when Chloe started screaming my name. I did not look back when the restaurant manager rushed over to their table. I walked out into the humid, warm Charleston night, letting the heavy wooden doors slam shut behind me, completely severing my ties to the rotting corpse of my family. 4 hours later, I was seated by the window of a commercial airplane, soaring 30,000 feet above the American Midwest. I pulled the old matte black phone out of my coat pocket. I powered it down entirely, watching the screen fade to absolute black. I rested my head against the cold glass, looking out at the endless expanse of the quiet, starry night sky. The betrayal still ached deep inside my chest, a permanent scar that would take years to fully heal. But as the plane carried me back to Seattle, back to the successful life I had built entirely with my own 2 hands, I took a deep, cleansing breath. For the first time in my entire life, the chains were broken. I was completely free, and I was finally the absolute master of my own destiny. Thank you so very much for listening to my story today. Where in the world are you tuning in from right now? Please let me know in the comments below. If you found today's story engaging and want to support our channel, please consider donating just $1. You can help by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen, or by using the PayPal link located in the description or the pinned comment. Your generous support allows us to pay our dedicated staff so they can provide for their families and continue creating even better stories for you to enjoy. Thank you again, and take care.